The stagecoach rattled to a stop in a cloud of dust, the driver snapping the reins and calling out the name of the ranch. Clara smoothed her worn skirts, her heart racing. Letters had been exchanged, promises written, and now she was here, on the edge of a new life. She clutched the small satchel that carried all she owned and stepped down, her boots crunching against the dirt road. The ranch looked bigger than she had imagined, sprawling fences stretching out toward golden fields, horses grazing in the distance, and smoke curling gently from the chimney of a weathered house. She pulled in a deep breath, trying to calm her trembling hands. This is it. My husband-to-be is waiting. Before she could take another step, the door to the house opened. A small figure came running across the yard, a little girl, no older than 7, her braids bouncing, her face flushed from excitement. She stopped in front of Clara, staring up at her with wide, hopeful eyes. Are you the bride?" the girl whispered, almost as though she didn't dare believe it. Clara blinked, caught off guard by the intensity of that gaze. She nodded slowly. "Yes, I was sent here to marry the rancher." The child's lips trembled into a smile before she leaned close and whispered, "God finally sent you to us." Clara's heart tightened. She didn't know this girl, hadn't expected such words. But before she could ask anything more, a man appeared at the doorway of the house. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and silent, his expression carved in stone. His hat shadowed his eyes, but she could feel the weight of his gaze. He stepped forward slowly, his boots heavy on the dirt, and stopped just a few feet from her. His arms were folded, his jaw tense. "You must be mistaken," he said in a deep, gravelly voice. "I didn't order no bride." Clara froze. The words struck her harder than any wind. But the letter. The arrangements were made. "This is the Patterson Ranch, isn't it?" The man's brow furrowed. "No, ma'am. This here is the Rollins place." Her breath caught. Wrong ranch. The realization sent a rush of heat to her face. The stagecoach had already rolled away in a trail of dust, leaving her stranded in the middle of nowhere. The little girl clutched Clara's skirt. "Papa, please," she said softly, looking up at the man. "She's the one. She has to stay." Clara turned her gaze between them. "Papa." This stern man was the girl's father? His hardened expression wavered, just for a second, before settling back into its guarded steel. "You'd best get back on that coach, miss," he muttered. "You don't belong here." Tears burned at the back of Clara's eyes. She had nowhere to go, no one else waiting for her. She had sold everything for this chance. And now she was not only unwanted, she was utterly alone. But the little girl wouldn't let go. She wrapped her small arms around Clara's waist and whispered again, "Please stay. God sent you to us. I prayed for you every night." Clara looked down at the child, then back at the man whose eyes betrayed a flicker of pain beneath all that hardness. Maybe God had brought her here, even if by mistake. And so began the strangest, most unexpected chapter of her life. That first night on the Rollins ranch was the longest of Clara's life. The man, Ethan Rollins, had allowed her inside only because the sun was setting and the coach would not return for days. Clara sat at the heavy wooden table while he spooned beans into 3 tin bowls. His movements were stiff, deliberate, like a man who had lived too long in silence. The little girl, Annie, sat beside Clara, her eyes never leaving her face, as if afraid she would vanish. Every few minutes, Annie would smile shyly or lean against Clara's arm. Ethan noticed but said nothing. When supper ended, Ethan pushed his chair back. "You can stay in the spare room until the driver comes back through," he said flatly. Clara nodded, her pride keeping her voice steady. "Thank you. I'll be no trouble." But she already knew she wasn't just passing through. Something in Annie's touch, something in the ache of Ethan's eyes when he thought no one noticed, told her that fate had tangled their lives together for a reason. The following morning, Clara awoke to the crow of roosters. She found Annie waiting with eager eyes and a tangle of hair. "Will you braid it?" the girl asked, thrusting a small comb into her hand. Clara's throat tightened as she knelt to smooth Annie's hair. Of course. She hadn't expected to feel so needed so soon. With every stroke of the comb, Annie leaned closer, as though she had been starved for a mother's touch. Ethan walked past the doorway, pausing for just a moment before continuing out to the barn. Clara caught the shadow of his expression, guarded, yet softening. Days passed, each one weaving Clara deeper into the rhythm of the ranch. She mended torn shirts, cooked suppers, and read from Annie's worn Bible by lamplight. Ethan spoke little, but when he did, his voice carried weight. One evening, after Annie had gone to bed, Clara found him sitting on the porch, the prairie stretching endlessly before him. "You lost your wife," she said gently, not as a question but as a truth she had pieced together from the silence. His jaw tightened. "Years back. Annie was just a baby. Been me and her ever since." Clara folded her hands in her lap. "She's a sweet child. Strong, too. But no child should grow up without a woman's care." Ethan's gaze shifted toward her, sharp and unreadable. "Careful, Mississippi, don't go thinking a mistake brought you here for a reason." But his voice lacked the harshness it once had. Clara met his eyes, steady and brave. "Sometimes God works through mistakes." For a long moment, neither spoke. The wind carried the scent of wild sage across the porch, and the stars blinked awake one by one. By the end of the week, Clara knew she would not leave. The stagecoach driver returned, surprised to see her still at the Rollins place. "This ain't Patterson land, ma'am. You comin'?" Clara glanced at Annie, whose eyes brimmed with silent pleas. Then she turned to Ethan. His expression gave nothing away, but his clenched fists betrayed the storm inside him. Slowly, Clara shook her head. "No. My place is here." The driver tipped his hat and rode on, leaving dust in his wake. Ethan exhaled, long and heavy. "You're making a mistake." But Annie flew into Clara's arms, crying, "No, Papa! She's the answer to my prayers." And for the first time, Ethan didn't correct his daughter. He just looked at Clara with something raw and unspoken burning in his eyes. The days that followed were filled with a quiet transformation. Ethan no longer kept his distance. He began teaching Clara how to tend the horses, how to ride across the prairie, how to mend fences. She laughed with Annie, sang while they cooked, and brought warmth into rooms that had long felt cold. And Ethan, slowly, reluctantly, began to smile again. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the horizon, Clara stood beside him at the fence. Annie chased fireflies in the field, her laughter ringing through the dusk. Ethan's voice was low, almost gruff. "This ranch has been empty for a long time, Clara. I didn't think I'd ever hear laughter here again." She turned toward him, her heart beating fast. "Maybe that's why God sent me to the wrong ranch." He met her eyes, and in that moment, all the walls he had built crumbled. He reached for her hand, rough and calloused, yet gentle as it closed around hers. Annie ran up, breathless, clutching a jar of glowing fireflies. She looked between them and grinned. "See, Papa, I told you God sent her." Ethan let out a deep, shuddering breath and drew Clara close, his voice breaking with truth. "Maybe he did." And under the wide, endless sky, Clara realized she had finally found the home she had prayed for all her life, not with the man who had sent for her, but with the man God had chosen.